Good evening, and welcome to the 41st Legislative District Virtual Town Hall. Tonight, you will be hearing from State Representative My-Linh Thai. Some of you have submitted questions in advance, and I will be reading those questions. You may also submit your questions live via the comment section on YouTube and Facebook. So please submit your questions now, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Before we begin answering questions, I'd like to open the floor up to Rep. Thai for some brief opening remarks. Hi, Rep. Thai.
Hi, thank you, Samir. Hello to the constituent from the 41st District or anywhere in the state of Washington. My name is My-Linh Thai. I have the honor to represent the 41st Legislative District since 2018. My first session in Olympia was 2019. And honestly, by naming all of those numbers, it felt like a long time ago. But in the perspective of things, it has not. I want to first take this opportunity to thank you for giving me the honor to represent you, for giving me the opportunity to be the voice in Olympia, sharing your concern, working on policies that intend to improve the lives of Washingtonians. As I was committed to continue communicate and engage with the community that I serve, after the pandemic, when we were able to engage in person in this interim, I had put forward three different coffee chats at three different locations. The first one was in Newcastle, and it was specifically having conversation with neighbors um, about healthcare and long-term care, as I am sitting on healthcare and wellness in the House committee. The second coffee conversation was around community safety, as I also am having the honor to serve on the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committees in the House. And that happened in the city of Issaquah. And the last coffee chat that I had the chance to engage with communities was around our revenue. How does the state address the regressive taxation as policy in our state? Continue to ask the working individuals and working families to to pay the most tax, to carry that tax burden in our state, and how do we look forward of different potential policies in place um, to reduce such regressive taxation that truly impact the working people around our state. And that was done in the city of Bellevue. I look forward to hearing from you in the upcoming session. As you may know, the legislature is a part-time legislature. Um, there's so many intent behind why we worked as part-time legislators. Um, but one of the important piece is usually our budget is a 2 years budget. Last session was a long session, we call it. It's 105 days. This upcoming session is going to be a short session, or we call it a supplemental budget session, which will be 60 days. Our session usually starts on the second Monday of January and start counting the clock through either 105 days, or in 2024, it will be 60 days session. The intent of a short sessions is an opportunity for lawmakers to reevaluate some of the policy that has passed in the last session, to see what needed fix, what needed change, because we have a short period of time to sort of test things out, and also to look at whether when we allocate funding for some of these important work across our state, whether that was adequate, um, or too much. And so the short sessions is, in our mind, it is the space where we coming in and continue our conversations across the state by your representatives, um, to ensure that the intent of legislations are being met. And in that space, we continue to engage with the executive, which is the governor's office and state agencies, and certainly looking to you, the people of Washington, to share with us your story, how these policy has been impacted, um, for the better or not, for yourself and your loved one. Um, and so the purpose of this town hall is to report back to the community, my activities, engaging with my constituents during the interim. If you are interested in what else I have been doing in the interim outside of sessions, I'm really looking forward to continue that conversation with you. Hopefully, we will have a little bit of time at the end of session, so I can, at the end of this town hall or virtual town hall, so that I can share with you some of the highlight of the policies that I am working on for the 2024 session. With that, Samir, let us begin our engagement with our community.
Sounds good. Thank you for that very informative introduction. Our first question comes from Thomas, who asks, what will be done to reduce catalytic converter theft in Washington?
Well, thank you, Thomas, for that questions. I heard so much about this as an issues. And in 2022 session, we push out a policy, and it's the House bill. It's House Bill 1815. And what this policy done is to, um, and by the way, I want to make sure my colleague is being called out and taking the credit for her effort of pull together a large stakeholders in the state dealing with these issues. And so what this legislation done is that is required additional documentations from the scrap metal recycler and the vehicle wrecker, um, in order to get the data we needed when these catalytic converters being stolen. Where do they go? Who do they sell to? We also create a 3 days cooling period for them to make payment beyond a $30 to seller, that give us an opportunity to cross check and ensure that the metal being sold was not being stolen. And that is one way for us to figure out where the source of these theft as well. We create a consumer protection violations within the Consumer Protection Act, so that we have the stick in the policies. So when we actually find out whether this is a legitimate recycling, a legitimate sale, versus a theft, we can then catch those who commit these acts, and using the law that we have in place through the Consumer Protection Act to ensure that these criminals could not continue their crime. I would be happy, Thomas, if you give us communicate to my office and let us know how we can communicate with you either through email or send you the information about the legislation itself. This and then and then that way you can continue follow up with us and help us keep getting better at how these policy ensuring these activities can be stopped.
Thank you, Reptai. Before we move on to the second question, I would just like to remind the viewers that this is a virtual town hall with you, and they can submit their questions in the comment section on Facebook and YouTube. Moving on to the second question, Paul has asked, what can we do to make sure product producers only use packaging we know can be recycled or composted?
Well, Paul, thank you for the questions. It is it is a very important part of how we ensure that uh, the public is being safe. How do we ensure to protect our water quality from toxin, and definitely as part of um, committing to protect climate, not only for this generation but many generations to come. I'm also am very pleased that our students in the high school level, and I think in the last during this interim, more students in the middle school started to have reach out and have conversation with me, whether they're from Rhode Island, Bellevue, or Issaquah School District, relating to how do we push forward policies around this particular topic and area. So I can say that in the last session, the WRAPT Act, House Bill 1131, was introduced by Representative Berry. And in it, your question is being addressed in the policy itself. It has a lot of stakeholder engaging in that conversation. It did not go through to the finishing line last session. We are committed to bring that piece of policy um, uh, up in this session, and if you has been engaged in the work in this wrapped act as introduced last session, there is the piece about packaging material, about material specific, and there's another piece around bottle recycling. In this upcoming session, we split that piece of legislation into two separate bills because we heard loud and clear from communities and from stakeholders that these two issues deserve its own space for conversations and creating space and really get into the heart of policies. What does it mean when it's come to packaging material, and what does it mean by increasing access to recycling, whether it's aluminum or bottle. I mean, for us, because we live in King County, we enjoy the curbside pickup. All we have to do is like really mindful about bringing our recycled materials and put it in the bin and take it out to the curbside and being picked up every week. And so that's a privilege we have in engaging with across the state. That is not the case. And we know that when we look at ensuring our climate is sustainable for many generations to come, it would not be successful if only one part of the state is doing it, not only one part of the nation is doing it, not only one part of the globe is doing it. This required all of us doing it. And how do we set the kind of policies in the way that increasing access to recycling, as far as incentives to recycling, and and also making sure that those who are being impacted by these policies are really at the table, and we can hear from them what kind of barriers and how we can support them while pushing out these policies. So once again, Paul, thank you for the question. And I hope you continue follow this legislation in 2024.
Thank you, Rep. Tai. The next question comes from Michael. He says his wife has Alzheimer's and he is a caregiver. He asks, what are you doing to ensure affordable respite services for caregivers?
Michael, thank you. Thank you for your question. As I mentioned, I sit on healthcare. Um, this is one of the pieces that every single time we hear policy around this area, it's really um, touch our heart, and it's move us to action. So I really wanted to share with you that last session, I worked to secure a $91 million increase in rate and reimbursement, um, and $762 million in rate for individual home care workers. Um, because as you mentioned, and it what I if I hear you, if I understand your question correctly, you are one of the thousand, if not hundred of thousand of people who need to stay home and care for their loved one simply because our state continue um, to lack of facilities. We continue to work toward building the workforce as far as caring for individuals and working toward building the infrastructure, providing the entire healthcare system up and down, from students who are in school eligible for special education to individuals in our community who experience these long-term care issues. And beside that, we also increase the rate, paying from Medicaid paying rate for assisted living. It's The dollars figure is $119 million. Um, because it's the entire system, we need to address them. And so looking ahead, we wanted to continue making sure that everybody who are in the spectrum of the entire system caring for people, whether at home like yourself or in facilities, we want to make sure that the workforce development is available through the education system, through ensuring living wage for those who choose to work, supporting our people in this area, and ensuring that people who care for their loved one at home are workers too.
Thanks, Rep. Tai, and thank you, Michael, for that question. Before we move on to the final two questions, with 10 minutes remaining, I just want to remind viewers that they can submit questions in the comments section on Facebook and YouTube for a chance to have that answered before we conclude this virtual town hall. The next question comes from Barb. She asks a couple questions. First, what are we doing to accelerate decarbonization? What are the legislative priorities? And what are you doing to protect the state's Climate Act from repeal via ballot measure?
Thank you, Bob. I can say what's the legislative priorities. First and foremost, climate has been our top priorities, and it will continue to. You probably have either read, seen, or perhaps even participate in the governor's press conference. I believe it was on Monday morning, specifically share with uh, Washingtonian his slate of climate commitment and policies from the governor's office, presenting to us through the legislative process. And so we all know the effect of climate change having far reaching to as far as consequences to all Washingtonian. and especially community has been who has been impacted the most are those who really don't have the resources, and being forced to live in the area where a lot of these toxic and fume being push out in the environment daily, and we all pay for it. All those our marginalized community and community of color experiencing diseases and illness because of the exposure to these toxins. Um, but in the end, is I believe that we all pay for it. We pay for it through our healthcare. We pay for it through the significant shortage of workers. I mean, we not only want to have a highly skilled, highly qualified workforce, but also healthy workforce. And the idea of building capacity in the way that who, people who work, they can live where they work, because that is how we can continue building communities. Um, we passed the Climate Commitment Act. We looking forward to continue engaging with legislators and community across our state, really looking at our prioritizing of what we do with the Climate Commitment Act. So all of the policy in those spaces to ensure we're looking at building community, to ensure transportations is being addressed, as like I say, the distance of people having to travel, looking at how do we, as you asking, decarbonizing, we looking at engaging with farmers across Washington. We engaging with people who are in state agency, uh, working in public land, and as far as the educations, I mean, we building the upstream that we engage with our students in the K-12 and of course at college level, engaging all those from being aware and building capacities for scientists to be part of this work and help us looking into technologies of how we not only speed up, as you say, accelerating this process, but building capacity to keep working at it until we meet our goal and preferably exceeding our goal.
Perfect. For our last question, it comes from a viewer, Claudia. She asks, do you think that Washington state can have a role in increasing the number of refugees allowed to immigrate, especially for those seeking asylum?
Thank you, Claudia. I think you're asking a question that is very near and dear to my heart. I don't think this is a secret that I am a refugee from Vietnam. I'm the first refugee elected to serve in the Washington state legislature. Um, I believe that refugee and immigrants are the added asset to the community wherever they chose to settle. In my own experience, I believe, just like anything, when we set people up for success, they will be successful, and that investment we put into space will be returned multiple fold. To your question, that sit in the executive office. It is the governor who who has the capacity of proposing increased number of refugees to allow to come into our space. And Claudia, as you know, in 2022, our state put out funding to help support and build the infrastructure. I mean, right? I mean, we don't want to invite people into our home. And when I say our home, I'm talking about Washington State, without ensuring that they have the services they need, such as housing, educations, job placement. So as we keep building those infrastructure, we then would have a way of monitoring when we are ready to support more people, because I believe that these are the talents that coming into our state and be part of the workforce that we are so needed in Washington. So thank you again for your question.
That was our last question of the evening. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I'm now going to turn it back to Rep. Thai for closing remarks.
Thank you, Samir. Once again, I thank you for your engagement, and please, for those questions that being sent in, if it was not being addressed or answered in this short period of time, um, I hope there's a way that we can share on the screen to send your question directly to my office, and we will respond to your questions. I During session, I continuous sending out, whether through video or e-news. Make sure that you subscribe to my e-news so that you can follow my work. My commitment to protect reproductive rights um, is there. I'm gonna have a piece of legislation that making sure that those who travel from out of state and coming into our state to receive these services will continue to have the support, the services, and being protected. And we will continue to protect our providers who provide these services for our friends, our brother and sister who happen to live in the state, that they don't have the services that we have here. I will continue my commitment to ensure housing is being addressed, to reduce homelessness in our state, because to me, when we work toward the space where we reduce poverty, we ensure that poverty is not the reason for crime, for our public safety, for our community safety. We ensure that people who are working, who are working poor in our state will be supported. So working family tax credit expansion is another piece of legislation that I pour my heart and soul into it. But really, last and not least, is really addressing our mental behavior health. In my lane, that is going to be in the K-12 system, looking at how our school and our community will continue supporting our kids who suffer greatly, not only past after the pandemic, but certainly before the pandemic, and looking at all the factors that impact their well-being. And so those are the area that I will focus on in 2024. And I look forward to continue conversation with you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Rep. Thai. That is all the time we have this evening. Thank you so much for attending and for submitting questions. If we didn't get to your question, you can directly contact Rep. Thai's office with your comments. Her contact info will be on the screen shortly. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great evening.